My name is Ben Passer, and this is my climate story. I could sum up my relationship with both race and climate in one word: complicated. I'm a mixed race male, half black and half white, and for basically my entire life, I've struggled with my racial identity. I have deep emotional ties to black culture and my heritage, but I have no actual connection to my black family. Growing up in an all white family, I'm fully aware of my white roots, but I don't feel connected to whiteness. And I know the world perceives me as a person of color, though that perception shifts wildly depending on where I am and who I'm with. My wife could probably tell you about a few uncomfortable moments during our vacation in Puerto Rico a few years ago, where folks we met after a foggy hike in El Yunque National Forest assumed from my brown skin that I was a fluent Spanish speaker. Now, this confusion was nothing new. I vividly remember, as a kindergartner, sitting in the cafeteria of my elementary school, having classmates ask me if I was adopted, because they'd only seen my white biological mother at parent teacher conferences. Internally, I remember the tension I felt as a high school student, not being able to fully relate to my entirely white friend group, friendships I still hold dearly to this day. And in my highly competitive, mostly white law school class, I never felt totally welcome either. I knew I was interested in the principles of justice and equal rights, but something about being there just didn't click. For me, that confusion vanished when Philando Castile was shot and killed on July 6, 2016, a mile and a half from my childhood home. The intersection where he died was so familiar to me. I thought of the hot August days when my family and I crossed Larpenteur Avenue as we walked to the Minnesota State Fair, one of my favorite traditions. I thought of all those nights I rode my bike home from the comic book store that used to be located right next to that intersection. For the first time in my life, I felt this collision of race and place, the place where I had roots. That tragedy was a moment of reckoning for me. Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. I knew things needed to get better, and I knew I needed to play a role. I guess you could say my interest in energy and the environment took a similar path. I remember learning in high school about the environment, pollution and its effect on the ozone layer, and this thing called global warming. When I was 18 years old, during my freshman year of college, I remember stumbling upon this new vehicle from Honda on the internet. It was called the FCX Clarity, and it was the first hydrogen fuel cell vehicle sold to retail customers. I became obsessed with this thing. A totally clean vehicle that drives just like a normal car. I mean, what's not to love, right? From that point on, I started to pay more attention to things like wind and solar energy and new technologies. But all through college and law school, I never really thought of any of that as a profession, just a personal interest. It took me a while to realize that all of these things, climate, race, and justice, were related. It sounds funny, maybe embarrassingly obvious to say now, but I really didn't figure it out until a couple of years ago. So much of my journey, especially over the last couple of years, has been figuring out who I am, how that shows up in the world, and how both of those things show up in my work. I think it's fair to say the energy and environmental movement has been on a similar journey to put all of these pieces together, too. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, yet another tragic killing of a black man in the place I call home, many environmental and climate organizations, mine included, put out statements of solidarity and committed to deeper learning and action. I think that in a lot of ways, the murder of George Floyd was that moment of reckoning for our movement, like the killing of Philando Castile was a movement of reckoning for me personally. These tragedies should never have happened, but I hope we can fully embrace this wake up call and that we can all do the necessary and long overdue work. The hard truth is that the mainstream energy and environmental movement has long struggled with racial diversity and has often overlooked or completely excluded under-resourced communities and communities of color. This is unacceptable because we know that these communities are the very ones that will be harmed first and worst by the impacts of climate change. And in fact, they already are. This conversation won't always be easy, but we need to have a dialogue about how race shows up, truly shows up, in the energy and environmental movement, and our ability, our obligation, to change the systems and structures that have perpetuated inequities and oppression for so many decades. We need to make sure that Black, Indigenous, and people of color truly see themselves in this movement and are fully included in it. Today, with the help of my peers and my friends of color, I feel I've found my voice, my own place in the world, and in this work. My story is just one of so many, and I'm privileged to have this microphone when so many don't and haven't. But my hope is that through sharing the tensions I felt, this complicated journey, I can help others like me so that in 5 or 10 years, they have no doubt, no hesitation about their rightful place in this work, and have the opportunity to thrive. My hope is that they'll see themselves in this movement not just as one part of it, but as leaders. My hope is that we'll use this moment of reckoning as an inflection point to fully embrace the intersectionality of all of these issues. My hope for the energy and environmental movement is that we center race, equity, and justice in all of our work, like the future of our planet depends on it. Because it does.